Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you to another episode of Candor with Pres Eve. And today I am joined with two extraordinary individuals, David Boehm, who is the Senior Vice President for Governmental Relations over at the American Association of Community Colleges. And we are also joined by Ji-Heng Lee, who is a Vice President at the Association of Community College Trustees. Welcome to both of you. It's just so wonderful to see you both.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Fantastic. So David and Ji-Heng, why don't you each tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about your work, and what you find exciting during these times?
Well, we could spend all the time talking about what we find exciting about these times. I'll go first. I've been doing higher education advocacy now really since 1980. And so I've been involved in this field working for a number of different advocacy groups over that time. But the longest time that I've spent by far is with the American Association of Community Colleges. And it's just a wonderful cause to be working for. I know everybody in the community college community feels that way about just the opportunity that we provide. The AACC, my organization, has institutional members. So community college presidents such as Pres Eve are members of the AACC, and we represent about 90%, almost all the community colleges across the country. And you know, these are extraordinary times, as everybody knows. I think if I'd say one thing that is most extraordinary about right now is the tremendous amount of domestic investment that is being made as a response to the coronavirus pandemic. And as I know we'll talk about in the next few minutes, how much possible new expenditures and new support for students and for colleges we hope to be seeing in the coming months.
Thank you. And Ji-Heng, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, good afternoon. I'm Ji-Heng Lee. I'm with the Association of Community College Trustees. We represent the governing boards of our nation's community colleges. And we also have some international members, which we're also happy to highlight. I've been with ACCT for a little over 15 years. You know, it's been a long time, not as long as David, although I can remember the first time David and I sat down for coffee on my first week at ACCT. In terms of the things that I oversee our advocacy, our public policy research, our membership, our communications, and our publications. So it's a pretty robust portfolio. In terms of the thing that I'm most excited about, if you take a look back and how we have supported higher education has largely been a state and local investment item. But we have seen further and further slippage on the state and local side, and we've seen significant growth on the federal side. And I'm relatively happy that Congress and the administration in the last 2 years have really stepped up to the plate to ensure that our students and our institutions have had the robust resources necessary to carry out their activities during the pandemic. And we're hopeful to continue that robust federal investment in higher education.
That's great. Well, let's talk about that federal investment. You've both alluded to that, and we've seen sort of a reversal in attitude and also in funding towards higher ed. And most recently, we had the president's announcement that he was willing to invest in free community college for everyone. What are your thoughts on what's happening now in DC, and you are seeing it firsthand? Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing and what promises that holds for our nation's community colleges?
I'll go first, and it is an extraordinary time. I think many of us felt that President Obama highlighted community colleges in a way that was unprecedented. Of course, other presidents have been highly supportive of community colleges as well. George W. Bush, before President Obama, put a significant amount of money into community college job training program. Bill Clinton before him also had some interesting proposals for community colleges and a major tax credit that was designed to help students attend community colleges, although it actually turned into something a little bit different over time. But I think right now what we're finding so amazing really is that not only as the president proposed, making community college free, but he's also trying to support other aspects of the community college mission. And he wants to help us refurbish and modernize our facilities, which we know in many places are in need of that kind of upgrading, renovation. We need the facilities to match the 21st century, workplaces that our graduates have. So that's another area where he's wanted to make a significant commitment to higher education and community colleges. And he also wants to support us in our job training function and to have community colleges, building on and enhancing their, critical role as the focal point of intersection between, the economy and higher education. So these are all areas where the new administration has trying to invest additional amounts of support. And there are also many things, I'm talking about institutional things, but there are also major commitments to student financial assistance and helping financially needy students finance college as well.
I would just add on the student side, we've seen the administration, they're seeking $1,800 in the Pell Grant maximum, which we think is fabulous. We're also seeing significant changes in like SNAP policy. We're also seeing that the administration is really invested in the areas around advising and counseling with students. That was one of their key components to the family plan. So we see it from both sides of the ledger in that, as David mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that's going on the institutional side, but also the administration is really being supportive of the activities that are supporting our students. Because one of the things that we do know, and we've seen 10 years of research on this, is that many of our students are struggling to succeed and complete because of unmet costs and life changes. And since the vast majority of our students are older than 18, your traditional age students, they need some additional supports. And I think these are things that the administration has been supportive of and will continue to support through its activities going forward.
That's great. And we're certainly seeing the effect of having Dr. Jill Biden, who is very well versed in community college issues and who understands firsthand the challenges of both institutions and students playing out, I think, in that support that we are seeing right now. In terms of the economic recovery, what role do you think community colleges can play based on some of the historical evidence of what we have done in the past in terms of recovery of from other economic crises? What are your thoughts on that?
Jihang, please go.
Yeah. So I think one of the major things that our associations together are trying to get into legislation is expansion of the Pell Grant program to include short-term programs. These are programs that are less than 600 clock hours that would support individuals getting access to skills-based training to pursue certifications, licensures, and other programs that lead to an occupation. We think that's a game changer for our institutions. If you take a look at where we are right now in terms of the economy, we think this is a good time for Congress to kind of step into this conversation. It has strong bipartisan support. Both our associations are supporting the Jobs Act, which is offered by Senators Kaine and Portman. And we're excited about the possibility of getting that into legislation and enactment at some point. I think there are other pieces, and I think in terms of other pieces, David, do you want to just talk a little bit about some of the workforce programs that Congress and the administration specifically have kind of offered for us in this space?
Yeah, and I just mentioned generally that one of the realities that faces institutions and is that training programs are particularly expensive programs, that because of the technology involved and the equipment that's involved, and sometimes the classes have to be smaller because of the nature of the technical instruction, that the programs are just very expensive to deliver. And there's a big economy out there, and for as big as community colleges are, with our almost 7 million students enrolling in credit programs every fall, that they lack in many cases the kind of financial support that they need in order to deliver programs that enable people to thrive in the economy. And one of the things that we saw even during the pandemic with the terrible unemployment, particularly in the first months of it, but we've seen extremely high numbers of unemployment claims being filed. They're finally starting to come down the past couple months, is that there was a skill shortage even in the middle of the pandemic, that there were lots of very good jobs that were open, that people weren't there weren't people available to fill those jobs. And of course, it's never, there's never perfect synchronization between what people can do and what employers want. Those things are always in flux and always changing, but community colleges are really exist in part to try to make those connections and make sure that insofar as is possible, that the kind of demands that industry has are being able to be met by the community colleges within their local communities to give people, greater economic opportunity. And we certainly aware of the challenges that people face. Jihang was talking about the needs that our students have, but that particularly for students who are older, maybe at least beyond the traditional age of college and have family responsibilities, the demands of working and maybe even raising a family and going to school. I mean, that's really a major burden, is to use a term, and commitment that people make. So we take the programs that we offer very seriously for students who enroll in our colleges. In terms of some of the things that Congress is considering, in addition to what my colleague Jihang was talking about, they are looking at a big job training program that the Biden administration has proposed, specifically targeted on community colleges. So that would be one thing. There are also proposed new investments in the area of apprenticeships, which is something that the Trump administration was supportive of, and new ways of looking at apprenticeships. The Biden administration and members of Congress are very much committed to that too. And there are also some programs, that are been around for a while that work very effectively and simply don't have the level of support that they need to fully meet the needs of the economy and meet the needs of our students, which include the Carl Perkins Act, which provides funding for vocational and technical education programs, as well as the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So there's a lot of areas in which the federal government gets involved in job training. But the bottom line of it is that the bottom line isn't quite as robust as we would like it to be, to allow our colleges to fulfill their missions.
That's great. I really appreciate your insights here on both the workforce side and also the Pell, extending the Pell to support students who are not enrolled in traditional academic programs, but rather workforce development oriented, skills-based program. Now let's talk a little bit about the president's proposal for free community college. Do you see that happening? You guys are right there on the ground in DC. You're able to get a pulse for what can make it through, what can be successful. What are some of the hurdles that you see us here needing to overcome for that to become a reality for all Americans that are able to meet that financial income threshold?
Well, I'll just mention that before we talk about the proposal, we do need to just remind ourselves, pinch ourselves, if you will, about the historic nature of this commitment that the Biden administration is trying to make on behalf of community colleges, to make community college free for most students. So, and it gets into the reality that in our economy today, people need to have more than a high school diploma in most cases in order to have a family sustaining wage. That's just reality, not in every case, but in most cases. So that's what really lies behind this. And I guess I'd only say that the one of the things that we're running into is that, not entirely surprisingly, is that the four-year colleges are not enamored with this proposal. Higher
Right.
education, for better or for worse, is a pretty competitive environment these days, with declining numbers of high school graduates in many parts of the country, including the Bay State. And so we're very aware of that. Jihang, do you want to maybe get into some of the other kind of political issues on this?
Sure. The reality is we have a very close Senate and very close House. especially on the Senate side with a 50-50 Senate with a tie-breaking vote by the Vice President. When whatever type of legislation, whether or not it's a bipartisan piece of legislation or a Democratic only bill, it's going to be squeaky. It's going to be it's going to be very close, no matter what transpires in terms of that. And I think that kind of creates a dilemma of how Congress and the administration moves these pieces of legislation together. We know that the president has met with a broad array of stakeholder organizations and members of Congress to talk about his infrastructure package. And there are proposals on the table on both sides. Those proposals, to my knowledge, did not include any free community college. So that's something that we're kind of eyeing. But yeah, it's the dilemma for us is how do we ensure that this gets into passage in the broad piece of legislation that does move. Our expectation is at some point the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats will push ahead, likely with a second budget reconciliation process. That second reconciliation process will mean that the Democrats on the Senate side only need 50 votes to pass. But that process, to my understanding, is probably we won't see this till September or late July at this point. In terms of some of the hurdles we see just with the proposal in general, David, do you want to just touch on a couple of things that we're working on right now, just to clear up some of the legislative language?
Yeah, but one thing I just want to say, since we're having a conversation about all these proposals that are benefiting community colleges that I think are really important for people to be aware of, and that is that these really are dramatically huge, colossal proposals. A colossal amount of money has already been spent on a whole array of domestic programs and supports for people in our society, many of them targeted on lower income individuals that were done particularly in the American Rescue Plan Act, which was signed by the president in March. But even last year under legislation that was signed by President Trump, particularly the unemployment benefits, but other things as well, really were major expansions of government support for people. And it's very expensive. And I think people should understand that we are running up these expenditures on the nation's credit card bill. And so in terms of what Jihang was talking about in terms of the Democratic Republican balance, particularly in the Senate, but it's almost as tight in the House, is that there's a lot of concern more on the Republican side of the aisle, but not limited to that, about just that we're racking up all this debt and we're not exactly sure when we're going to reckon with it. It's not anything new. It's right. The government's been doing it for a long time now. But it should be said that it's the amount that we have added to the debt in the last year, just a little bit more than a year now, is I don't know the figure off the top of my head, but it's bigger than anything we've ever done, I believe, since World War II. And so that needs to be kept in mind as you think about the narrower benefits of these programs. And one other thing I'll just say on this, somewhat of a tangent, is that we do view these, however, as being investments. As we know that the students that are attending community college, that when you provide them with opportunity, when you provide them with programs, you really are changing their lives forever, really helping them do better and helping the economy do better. So in the long run, we think it pays off. In the short term, the government in our area and other areas is spending a lot of money. In terms of just, one thing that I'll just mention that my colleague Jihang just mentioned it, that we're, looking very carefully is the role of the states and local government in this promise plan. And we do believe that it's appropriate to ask the partners of the federal government to provide support for our students, but we should understand, and viewers should understand, that this is not just good old Uncle Sam making community college free, but they're asking, the State House in Boston and other localities and state capitals to provide money as well. It's a complicated cost sharing arrangement I won't get into, but that we're looking very carefully to make sure that there's an effective partnership between these different levels of government.
That's a really good point. So I will wrap us up with this one question about a long-standing bill that really has not moved much, which is the Higher Education Reauthorization Act. Is either of you hopeful about this going anywhere? I feel like it's been years. We've been talking about that since it expired, and there's been no movement. And what can bring it to life, and who can bring it back to life?
I guess I could start. If I had a crystal ball, I would say the 117th Congress will not be a time period when we will move the reauthorization of HEA. I think that is, I think most of us in Washington, D.C. who work around higher education policy realize that, and that we are working on other pieces. Like I mentioned, short term is a piece that we're working on. We're working on increasing the Pell Grant maximum. We're obviously working on free college. In terms of the things that I think Congress needs to deal with at some point in time, though, in context to HEA, they really need to kind of address some of the shortfalls that are existing within the loan program. The way we have created our loan program, the way cohort default rates touch especially community college institutions, the repayment programs, and how we deal with the repayments and defaults and delinquency. To me, that is one of the most critical areas that Congress can address going forward. Ironically, given the pandemic, we have obviously done a student loan repayment pause since last March, in which we'll initiate in October 1st. Our expectation is when students start repaying in October, starting on October 1st, we will see significant amount of delinquencies and defaults. And that might even spur Congress to take some more action, or the administration to take some action, not necessarily legislatively, maybe regulatory or other activities, but loans is definitely a big issue that Congress needs to deal with at some point.
Yeah.
David, what do you think about some other ideas?
Well, I do think that I agree with you that the likelihood of there being this big overarching law revised in the current Congress, 117th Congress, are not great. It could happen next year, but we're not very optimistic about it. And Jihang just talked about something that's very important to community colleges, because our students, even though we don't borrow as much as students attending more costly institutions do, students still have some major challenges in managing their debt for various reasons. So we're very, very focused on that. And I guess something else that we're doing a lot of work on is trying to ensure that the ways that the government gathers information about our colleges and evaluates our colleges, the metrics, as it were, that they use to show success or failure. It gets a little bit into the loan area that Jihang just talked about, but really what a success is in higher education and how it's presented to the public. It might sound a little, irrelevant, but for many of our students who go to community college just to get a better job, maybe they complete their program, maybe they don't, maybe they get an industry certification and go into work. That is really important to us, and just making sure that we can evaluate better how all of our students are doing within the federal framework and the information that the federal government requires of colleges, which is a lot of information. As the president, you can attest to.
Yes.
The amount of funds that are devoted to complying with all these federal requirements. That's really important to us. So we're just slugging away, and I know we want to wrap up, and I know it's a little bit, maybe not a glowing note to close on, but the reality is that Congress just doesn't pass a lot of bills anymore. The R's and the D's just don't get along. They're not finding a lot of political benefit in meeting in the center and passing bills and cutting ribbons together and being in Rose Garden signing ceremonies. And so it has an impact across the board and includes the legislation that funds our students and our colleges.
Thank you for those insights. It seems like despite inaction on passing bills, we've been able to find ways to circumvent that and still benefit community colleges. So some things are working, and I would say on behalf of our nation's community colleges, we are very fortunate to have both of you underground, such insightful, seasoned leaders who are able to not only advocate for us, but keep us informed and let us know where we can apply pressure on our own, whether it's locally or at the federal level with our congressional delegation. And I will just add that in Massachusetts, we're very lucky to have a very strong delegation that continues to advocate for us and bring us results. So thank you so much. Thank you both. It's been wonderful to have you, Jihang and David, with us this afternoon. And thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend, everybody.
You too.